I'm afraid to touch it after all.
So then when you switch over and introduce Brandon, do you want to start the next one?
I can swap,
or-
yeah,
okay.
I'll swap.
Yeah, because I don't think
Okay, if I can have your attention, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. My name is Bob Whipperfirth. I'm the president of the Village of Windsor, and I also serve as president of the Dane County Cities and Villages Association. So again, we want to welcome everyone that's here. This was an open workshop for towns, cities, and villages. We hope that we're going to be presenting some good information for you today to take back to your local municipality. So we're going to try to get done by 3 o'clock. I know everybody has busy schedules and they have other commitments after this today. So I'll let Ann Griffin do the introduction of our guest. Thank you.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming. Welcome to the Dane County Cities and Villages Association Local Roads Workshop. We have 3 presenters with us here today. First is Benjamin Jordan. He's the director of the Wisconsin Transportation Information Center. And he will be followed by 2 individuals from the Wisconsin Asphalt Pavement Association. And that is Deb Schwerman and Brandon Strand. So let's give them a warm round of applause and a welcome.
Thanks. You can call me Ben Jordan with UW-Madison Transportation Information Center. And normally applause doesn't happen until you see what I have to say and see whether it's actually worthy of applause, right? We're going to talk about local roads and some of the questions that we had, some of the questions we were asked to address in this presentation are, how can we have better roads when budgets are limited? How can we prolong the life of roads? And what's the latest in better roads technology? So those were the questions that were posed to us when we were asked to do these presentations. Now it's going to be a little bit challenging because I'm going to talk about some technologies that you may say, well, that's been around a long time. That may be not the latest or the greatest. But you're going to see from my discussion that a lot of this involves looking at all of the tools that we have and a few tools that we haven't been using a lot, and selecting the right ones for the right situations. All right, so how can we extend the life of our streets and our budgets? One of the first things I want to talk about is using the data and the information you already have about your system to make sure that we select the best treatment. And then consider adding more treatments to your, and I gave you 3 choices there. You got a militaristic choice, your arsenal. If you're a mechanic, your toolbox. If you're an artist, it'd be your palette. Or maybe it's your palette and your different brushes, right? You don't use the same thing every time, right? Well, some of us use a hammer as our tool for just about everything, right? But is it always the best tool? Not really. So we need to think about that a little bit more. So I'm going to ask you some questions. How many people are familiar with doing pavement condition ratings? All right. So we all have to do pavement condition ratings every 2 years by state statute and submit those to WISTAT. So I'm assuming everybody in the room is doing that. How many people are using that pavement condition rating data as part of your decision-making process for selecting the treatments that you're going to do on your roads? All right, still, okay, good. I still have a lot of hands there. Had a few less hands. How many folks are using the decision-making tools, the what-if tools in the Whistler web-based software, which, well, first I should ask how many people are using the Whistler web-based software to submit their ratings? All right. How many people are using the tools in that software that allow you to do 5-year projections, what-if scenarios, scenarios with different budgets? How many people are doing that? All right. Notice how many fewer hands I got. All right. So a suggestion I'm going to make to everyone else is that you explore those tools. We're trying to schedule some additional training this summer, either late, well, actually we're trying to do late this spring, but it looks like it'll likely get pushed to summer on those Whistler pavement tools. So you have web-based tools free of charge. You're already using them to report your ratings. It has some tools to do 5-year what-if scenarios based on your maintenance treatments that you use and your costs, because you can update those things. The limitation of that software is the deterioration curve, it has a deterioration curve built into an equation for each pavement type, and it projects what the condition will be in 5 years if you don't do anything to the road. That's a statewide average. So it has city streets, it has county roads, it has other things in it as well. Town roads. And so your pavements might behave a little bit differently, but if you're not using that tool, how are you projecting right now what things are going to look like in 5 years? I guess we're not, right? We're just basically doing an inventory, we're looking at current condition, and we're making selections, maybe based on a number of different criteria, a couple things we'll talk about. So if you haven't been looking at that, look at it. Look at using the tools, maybe explore the training, talk to someone else in this room who raised their hand, and talk to them about that Whistler tool and how you could utilize that. Because I'm sure the elected officials, when they're presented with a plan, would really like to have some of that projection of, what's going to happen if we do this. Because some of the other approaches we take, if we're not looking at a fairly detailed plan and making those projections, is we do some of these things. We say, well, what was our budget last year? We got the same budget, what can we do with that budget? We have a standard program based on the calendar. We do a slurry seal every 6 years. If we did that, and a couple people are smiling saying every 6 years, I don't have the money to do that, right? But if we did that, what could be some of the problems if we say, we're going to do this every 6 years based on the calendar? See, normally I would wander into the audience and make somebody answer the question, but I'm on camera here, so I'm restricted to being up here. So I'm going to try to reach out this way and say, someone tell me, what would be some of the disadvantages of doing it on a calendar basis?
Well, you have some roads that are obviously going to have more traffic than others. They're going to have more wear. Some will be a lot less,
Okay.
a lot less volume.
So the answer was, we have higher traffic roads, lower traffic roads. They're going to deteriorate at different rates. We also have potentially different original construction. One of the roads may have been much thinner and can support less traffic. They may be built over different soils. One may have poor drainage, another may have good drainage. All of these things are going to affect the performance of that road. And so if we're doing things on a calendar basis only, without looking at how things are deteriorating, some of them will do too early, some of them will do too late. Worst first, fighting fires, those kind of things get us into this mode of throwing all our money into the worst condition pavements. And we do that, what do the rest of the pavements do? They continue to deteriorate. Even though you're all great people and you're working really hard at your job and you're trying to do your best, that road's going to still continue to deteriorate, right? And so you're going to build more of a backlog of problems if you aren't doing some of that earlier low-cost maintenance. Political pressure, I can't do anything about that. I mean, if you have to allocate your program based on wards, you got to do it. And you may have to take the Whistler information and dump it into a spreadsheet and adjust it, but that's still not the best way to apply your resources. And that wasn't my note. I adopted these from someone else's presentations. So we're going to try to select the right maintenance treatment for each road, try to use all those tools, try to use the best decision-making tools we have. You've probably all seen some curve like this. In reality, the curves look a little different, but theoretically, pavement's in good condition. It slowly deteriorates, and we want to do low-cost maintenance while it still has a low rate of deterioration. Because at some point, that deterioration accelerates in rate. And if we wait until that steep part of the curve, we're going to spend much more on our maintenance or rehabilitation of that pavement. The idea is, we do maintenance, we shift the curve out, we get additional life. An example from Whistler, because I was promoting the tool. Here's, this was out of a consultant's report to Town of Grafton, and it's example of the kind of simple what-ifs you could do with that software. They looked at their system, Pacer 1 to 10 rating system. I don't like that it says 0 there because there is no 0 in the rating system. They sorted basically their system into what percent falls into each of these bins. 0 to 3 that need reconstruction, and you can select these parameters in the software, so you can select whether you want to do 0 to 3 or 0 to 2 or however you want to sort it. So they have 2%, almost 3% in that condition, 21% in 4, 18% in 5, 21% in 7 to 8, 31% in 9 to 10. So what happens if we continue with our current budget for 5 years? Well, it goes from this to this, based on their current budget and their current maintenance procedures. Any problems with that? There, I'll give them to you both on the same graph. First thing you don't want to do, you do not want to manage based on average rating. You don't want to go to your council and say, well, you know, we're going to continue on this. It's really not that bad with this current budget because we were at a 6.98 average rating, and projection 5 years out, we're going to be 6.72. So it's not that bad. It hasn't changed that much. The problem with that is if you average it together, you hide some of the particular issues that you might see. So one thing that jumps out when you compare these is in that 5 years with their current budget, the 0 to 3 rating went from less than 3% of the system to over 17% of the system. Right? So that's certainly something that you'd want to be aware of as you're making your plan. As elected officials, people who are considering approving a plan would like to have that information as well. So we can give you some of those simple tools in that Whistler program. That's what this output came from. All right, how can you prolong the life? Continue to perform low-cost maintenance early in the life of the pavements. If you get to a situation where, yes?
Sorry, can you go back just one quick?
Yes, again.
Is Whistler basing that off miles of road or segments? To come up with that average?
I believe it's basing it off of the center line length of each of those segments. Yeah, I don't think it's doing a percent of segments that are in that category.
Okay.
If you want to make absolutely sure of that answer,
I don't think it is.
contact the folks at the Whistler helpline and ask that question.
I was curious.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, so you're saying that from your experience, you think that what it's doing is giving you a percent of segments.
Yes.
Okay,
And,
I will check on that.
and for us, Whistler has about 1,000 segments.
Mm-hmm.
And for our in-house database, we have about 500.
Mm-hmm.
So
You can go into that system, I believe you can, I know you can split segments, I believe you could also combine segments as well.
correct.
So if you would like to try to get it to match up
Yeah, we,
better with your in-house, that can be done. So, but if you have, yeah.
so being that it's based off of segments,
Mhm.
is that really a true projection of where you're gonna be if you're basing it off of?
If it's based off of segments, it's going to shift that a little bit.
If you're looking over, if you're saying if I, in the city of Middleton, we have around 72 miles of road.
Mhm.
If I'm basing that off of segments versus miles, I'm not gonna be able to look and say, well, in my 72 miles, I've got, my percentage is this. That's where I wish it would flip it.
Okay.
by the mile.
I'll check into that a little more, and if you have a minute at the end, we could have a discussion about that. I have the disadvantage, I wasn't on board doing this when they developed the software, but I am trying to talk them into doing some upgrades. And so getting that kind of feedback, trying to get upgrades on the condition deterioration curve so that they'll match a little bit better to experience as well. So I'd like to talk to folks who are using it about some of those things. So I'll be happy to have a little discussion at the end about that.
Yeah, I would say that is a good idea, so that just way too many segments.
Yeah, although in terms of looking at ratings and segments, and this is going to kind of veer a little bit from the topic, you want to select the segments based on pavement that is in similar condition. Okay, so if you had, and I realize a lot of times in cities and villages, you're probably doing it by blocks, roughly. So if I have 5 blocks that were constructed at the same time, the same condition on the same road name, I'm probably going to do that as one segment. But if 2 of those blocks were constructed at a different time, have a different thickness, probably should be a different segment. It probably does make sense to break it up that way, even in your rating system. If you're getting down to breaking down smaller than blocks in a city, that wouldn't make sense to me. But it does make some sense to break it up by the parameters of that. If there's an area that I know had very poor soils and it's going to perform differently, it makes some sense to break that out from the rest of the segment. All right. If we're looking at budget issues, don't cut your crack sealing, don't cut your surface treatments, don't cut those lower cost maintenance treatments, because those are things that are delaying the deterioration of your better conditioned pavement. That's a little bit of a challenge, because you go to a board and you say, well, we need to keep spending money on this, let's cut one of these reconstruction projects so we have money to do maintenance. And what do people call and complain about, or come to board meetings and complain about? The roads that are a 6 or a 7 or an 8? No. You know, the 4, the 3, the 2, that's what gets the attention. But if we continue to do that, shift the resources just to the worst conditioned pavements, we're going to dig ourselves a bigger hole. There is no magic bullet. Despite the fact that in Iowa, the Asphalt Association has a thing here that says they found the magic bullet. It's just the magic bullet for interlayers between concrete pavements and asphalt pavements. They have a lot of concrete local roads in Iowa, more than we do in Wisconsin. So it actually, when you read the article, it's a tool that they found is very effective for a certain application. And that's the way we should look at all these maintenance tools. Selecting the right one for the particular conditions that we have. So something like a crack seal or crack filling, we should continue to look at those maintenance treatments. We should continue to do those treatments. When you look at life extension, generally what is shown in different research, if pavement's in good condition, it's saying 3 to 4 years of life extension. If you wait and you do that crack seal later in the life, 2 to 3 years in fair condition, it says 0 to 2 in poor condition. That pavement has deteriorated to the point where crack seal is probably not a good strategy when you get a pavement in poor condition. So you want to continue to do those type of maintenance treatments. You're all familiar with those. We are seeing more of these crack filling treatments and kind of wide overband crack treatments for more deteriorated cracks. There are a number of products out there. These have some good applications. Here you see a cupped transverse crack, and they're putting a product like that on. You do need to watch out for some of those in longitudinal cracking. They may not be appropriate for that because of the safety concerns with skid resistance. Think about all the users. Think about motorcyclists. Think about bicyclists and all those folks. So these things have their application for some of those more deteriorated cracks, but again, they're appropriate for certain situations, not for every situation. Surface treatments. One of the kind of preliminary questions I got when I was asked to do this is, do we have alternatives besides chip seals? Right, that's not how the final brochure came out, but that was one of the questions to begin with. There are a number of surface treatments, and we'll touch on a few of them. Again, we'll talk about selecting the right one for your appropriate conditions. We want to use these on surfaces that are not structurally unsound, but they have some of these surface distresses. Rattling, oxidation, bleeding, moderate cracking, slight or moderate surface irregularities, because we're only putting 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch of material if we're putting a single layer down. We're not going to correct big ride issues with these treatments, but we can seal up that surface, we can give a new riding surface, we can get some life extension out of the products. So severe cracking, severe deterioration, base problems, drainage problems, we're not going to fix those with a surface treatment. So if we're putting surface treatments on roads that have these kind of issues, we're really just putting a Band-Aid on the road for a year or two. And it's really important that everybody understands that and doesn't expect anything more out of that treatment than just that 0 to 2 year life extension. Right? Structurally sound pavements. Our manual says treatments of this type would be for pavements of a rating of 5 or 6. But really all the research is pointing us to the earlier you do the treatment, the better. So when we revise that manual, I'm really looking at least probably going to showing it for 7s as well. We had some discussion just beforehand with the other speakers about, is a 5 really beyond the point where we're doing surface treatments? Our manual figures it still has structural capacity. These are surface issues, and so it would still be appropriate to do a 5. but you're getting less life extension out of this when you do it at a 5. And here's just a quote from one piece of research talking about, you know, that early life deterioration of the pavement and how it'd be beneficial to treat the pavements early. So it's saying aging occurs in the first 2 to 4 years of service life. And you build a new pavement or you resurface a pavement, what's the first thing you do? You go, I don't need to worry about that one for a while, we just put a bunch of money into it, right? Right? So we don't need to think about that for 5 years. Is that pretty much the way we think in a lot of cases? Well, this is saying no. As soon as you invest that money into it, you got to now think about what are the low-cost maintenance treatments we might do to that. So we'll touch on things like a fog seal. There are people doing fog seals as part of a construction contract. There are people doing fog seals at a 1-year warranty period because they're buying into this. They're saying, let's start doing some maintenance on these pavements as soon as the deterioration is occurring. These are actually the curves that are in Whistler for deterioration for different pavement types. And you remember that theoretical curve that we had about deterioration? It said, pavements, you know, they deteriorate slowly, and then somewhere out here it goes down like this. This was reality based on actual ratings and average ratings in Wisconsin, so averaging statewide ratings. And that's kind of showing that deterioration right from the start. Okay, it's a fairly steep curve, fairly steep angle, right from the start. I worry a little about this graph because somehow somebody on this one pavement type reported a number over 10. I don't know quite how that worked. And we got the graph extending to 0. So I think somebody projected the equations on the two ends a little bit. But that gives you a general idea of what that deterioration looks like.
Is that with or without treatment?
Well, that's the one thing that gets a little difficult, is you have a mixture of pavements with treatment and pavements without in the Whistler system. And so that's a challenge, because I'm trying to get you to do maintenance, and we're reporting based on the maintenance, and then how do we separate those out when we do the...
If I'm looking at that, I'm not seeing much of a difference in the graph.
It's a statewide average, so it's taking county roads, town roads, city streets, and it's taking ones that have had crack sealing done, ones that haven't had crack sealing done, ones that may have had a surface treatment, not had a surface treatment, and they're all getting mixed together. So it's a little bit of a challenge without breaking this down a little further, which is one of the other things we'd like to do in the future with that software, is break it down by more pavement types, and maybe break it down by agency types. So we put county roads together, city streets together, town roads together. Do some other things so that those curves fit a little bit better with your field experience. So talking about surface treatments. These are all the things that you're going to get out of those. New wear-in surface, improved friction, slowing aging, sealing the pavement surface. One of the things to look at, if these treatments aren't working well for you, before you say, I'm going to get out of the business of doing surface treatments on my pavements, is looking at, are there things we're doing wrong or things that our contractors are doing wrong in terms of how we're doing this? So if you're putting those treatments down very early in the season or very late in the season, when temperatures are marginal, when you have a lot of moisture, you're going to have a lot more failures. All right? And so everybody in this room wants theirs to be done in like July or August, right? So you have the best chance of success. What's the problem with that? The contractor wants to have a whole season of work, right? But I prefer to have my work done at the time when it's optimum to do that treatment. So temperature restrictions on early season, late season, not doing things like trying to push it when it rains in the forecast. All right, I've seen failures. I've gone out to jobs where I've been called out because there was a problem, and that's what it was. It rained before this material could cure. And so think about those things in your specifications. Make sure that you address those things, and make sure when you have a discussion with your contractors, you know, pre-construction type of meeting, that you've made it clear that we are serious about these limitations. They're there for a reason. They're there to assure you get good performance. Even with the surface treatments, we still want to seal or fill cracks, including the pavement curb joint. How many folks are sealing that joint between the pavement and the curb when you're doing your sealing? How many are not? All right, we would encourage you to seal that joint because water is not going to, we have a crown pavement, water runs from the middle of the edge, water gets to that curb line, it's not going to magically jump over that joint. It's just not going to do it. So sealing or filling, if it's wide, it's really more of a filling type of material, that joint is important. We take care of localized problems, patching those type of things before we put down a surface treatment. Make sure surface preparation is good. Make sure we remove vegetation from cracks. All these are things that are going to improve our performance. Fix drainage problems. If we have drainage problems beforehand and we do a maintenance treatment, we're going to have a road with a maintenance treatment and drainage problems, and we're not going to extend life. So available surface treatments. This isn't everything, but this is probably the range of things that you could specify in Wisconsin and find someone to do them for you. Maybe I'm missing something. So if there's something else you've done, I'd love to hear about it. If there are other things from the standpoint of the association that are out there, I'd love to hear about those as well. We touched on the fog seal, very early treatment. Chip seal, I think many of you are familiar with. Slurry seal, microsurfacing are somewhat similar. And then cape seals and scrub seals, which aren't really new technology, but they're things that are newer and done less frequently here in Wisconsin, but we're starting to see a little more of. So fog seal is basically a diluted asphalt emulsion. Asphalt and water mixed together and diluted a little bit further, and it's misted onto the pavement, a light application onto the pavement, very early in the life. You're not really seeing any distresses, maybe a little slight raveling, a little slight loss of fine material on the surface. Very low cost, and that's a parking lot application there, but on the right-hand side, it's been fog sealed, on the left, it has not. Trying to seal that surface up, trying to prevent some of that deterioration that occurs from some of the initial aging and oxidation of that asphalt surface. It's sprayed on, it's a diluted emulsion, very light application rate. Yes?
Would you consider that like an 8 for a pacer rating, like an 8,
Well,
a 9, or?
I would not. When you look at the PACER rating system, it basically talks about a seal coat, and you put a seal coat, assuming you took care of underlying distresses, it bumps the rating back up to an 8, right?
Right.
In reality, I would be putting this onto a pavement that probably has a rating of 8 or 7, okay? I want to do this very early. It doesn't have any aggregate, it's just asphalt emulsion. It's just intended to fill in some of the open voids on the surface, just to seal that surface up, slow the deterioration of that surface. So I probably would not bump my rating up from that, but the idea is that we'll hold it at that rating for a longer period of time. So you might go back in 2 years, and that 8 might still be an 8, all right, rather than deteriorate it down. But you really aren't doing a lot to the surface other than just spraying some asphalt on top. All right, for folks who like the technical information, you're going to vary the application rate based on how open that surface is. All right, chip seals. Very common surface treatment, maybe less common in curb and gutter streets than on rural cross sections, but I know it's something that we do, and it's something that I've done on urban cross section streets. If you're doing it and you say, we're going to get out of the chip seal business because it's just not working well, we'll talk about a few of the things you need to think about in terms of doing it right. First of all, it's a sprayed-on layer of liquid asphalt, often asphalt emulsion, covered by a single layer of aggregate, typically a crushed stone material that's about 3/8 inch size. Single size, doesn't have a lot of dust, fairly clean material. We sprinkle that material with a chip spreader, we roll it with a rubber tire roller, seals the pavement surface, improves skid resistance. From the standpoint of sealing that surface, giving you skid resistance, I really, really like this product. It really does a good job for a low cost. What are some of the disadvantages of the product for those of you who've used it? What are some, yes?
Complaints.
Complaints, why do people complain?
Messy.
Rocks flying, dust.
Okay, dust, rocks, Anything else?
Bleeding through,
What's that?
bleeding through the tar coming up through.
I'm sorry, did you get that?
In the hot days, the tar come up through.
Oh, bleeding, okay, got it, okay.
Bike tires, bicycles that are.
Bicycles don't make it, okay. All right,
And the car paint and it just going into.
car paint, okay. Let's talk about all these things. I have paid to detail cars before, and I know why it happened, but it actually wasn't a chip seal, it was a slurry seal. But some of those things may be issues where things aren't being done the optimum way. All right, so we'll talk about it, and I encourage you, if you're doing those programs and thinking of switching, first look at it and are there things we can do to improve our process before we just throw this out. That's just talking about the process. One of the things that's really important there, the design of this, the amount of liquid asphalt you need to put on the road needs to be enough so that about 2/3 of the depth of that stone is stuck into that asphalt. So, you know, if you're having problems with a lot of loose chips, we can talk about why those things might occur. All right, we said one size cubicle clean material, liquid asphalt application. There is a design procedure for figuring out how much asphalt and how much aggregate you need to put on a road. The one in Minnesota works very well for our climate. It's a modification of a method called the McLeod design procedure. And in Minnesota, they have a seal coat handbook that has that procedure in it. I'd highly recommend you taking a look at that. So if you're ending up with a lot of excess chips, is it because we're just putting too much on the road to begin with? Is it because we're putting them on too late and they're not getting embedded into the asphalt? Is it because our asphalt shot rate is not high enough and we're not getting 2/3 of that chip embedded in? What are the reasons for having excess chips? And try to solve that problem before you just throw the process out. This goes into some changes in application rate. If you always do the same shot rate, the same application rate, sometimes it's wrong because different surfaces absorb the material at different rates. Minnesota also says in this graph, it also depends on the traffic on the road. Higher traffic roads, you can actually cut that shot rate down a little bit. You want to make sure that the spray applications are consistent. The bars are set at the right height, nozzles are at the same angle, so you get a consistent appearance. I've gone out and looked at chip seals where you can see stripes down the road. That's because things weren't set up properly. So you had little hills of asphalt material and little valleys of asphalt material, and in the valleys the chip doesn't stick, and in the hills it bleeds. So you have stripes going down the road. Something was not done right in terms of the process. Something with the bar height or the nozzle angles that wasn't set properly when that chip seal was done. All right, closely following your distributor with your chip spreader. We're gonna, especially when you're doing emulsions, especially when you're doing rapid set emulsions, very close, getting that chip down right away.